Hello, and welcome to another edition of Salabana Cultures We See You Reading Nights, the Black History Month session. Today I will be reading If You Were a Kid During the Civil Rights Movement. The reason why I chose this book is because I thought it would give us a different perspective from other generations about if it was going on during their time, how it would look. So I wanted to make sure that we kind of hit a home run with this, and I actually kind of give the perspective of what happened back in the 60s, 50s, and 60s, and also kind of give a new, up-to-date, fresh millennial, I guess, or post-millennial view of what the civil rights movement would have looked like for us today. This book is by Gwendolyn Hooks and illustrated by Kelly Kennedy. Today we will be reading If You Were a Kid During the Civil Rights Movement. A Different Way of Life. The Civil War, 1861 through 1865, freed African Americans from slavery. But even in the 1960s, a century later, they were not treated as equal citizens. They did not have civil rights. Laws in southern states kept black and white Americans apart, or separated. Imagine being an African American kid at this time. You would attend a different school from white kids. Your school would be in poor condition. You wouldn't be allowed to eat in restaurants that were only for whites. Instead, you would order your meals at the back door. On buses, you would have to sit in the back seat. Segregation was allowed under the law, and things were supposed to be separate but equal for white and black people. But though life was separate, it was not equal. African Americans were determined to be integrated into society and gain equal rights. Meet Connie. This is Connie Underwood. She lives with her parents and her older twin brother, Robbie and Tommy, in Oklahoma. She and her twins have always been very close. She likes to climb her favorite tree to read and think up in its branches. Now she really has some thinking to do. The twins have a secret. Maybe that new boy who moved into the house behind hers can help solve this mystery. Meet Mark. This is Mark Jenkins. His family used to live on an Air Force base in Washington, D.C. Now he has to get used to a new school in Oklahoma. His old school was integrated. That meant African American kids and white kids were in the same class. But his new school is segregated. Every kid is African American. School starts soon, and Mark wants to make a friend before then. It's not easy being the new kid. It was a hot August evening in 1963. Connie grabbed a soda and headed outside. She climbed her favorite tree and hid in its shade. Her brother's voices floated into the backyard. She heard them use words like sit-ins, marches, and civil rights. Connie did not understand what it all meant. Her brothers were up to something, but what? Equal rights for all. Amendments to the U.S. Constitution guarantee certain rights. The end of slavery, protection from danger, and the right to vote are some of them. But many African Americans did not have these rights in the 20th century. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, was formed in 1909. This organization worked to protect the rights of African Americans to make sure they are treated equally. Young men head to a sit-in in Oklahoma City in August 1960. Sit-ins were often organized by the NAACP. Mark sat on the porch of his family's new home with two books. He was flipping back and forth between a mystery novel and the Green Book. Mark had started reading the Green Book during the long drive from Washington. His dad said they would have starved in the South without it. As he read, Mark thought about his friends he had left behind. The Green Book. African Americans traveling in the United States used the Green Book to plan their trips. This book was published in 1936 to 1964. It listed hotels, gas stations, and restaurants that welcomed African Americans. The book was very important to these travelers before the Civil Rights Movement brought change. A New York Post officer worker named Victor H. Green wrote the Green Book. Connie spotted her new neighbor. She climbed the fence into his backyard. They introduced themselves, and Mark told Connie about his move from Washington. Connie looked at her new friend's book. "I see you like mysteries," she said. "I sure do," Mark said. "Maybe tomorrow you can help me solve one," Connie said. Then she explained what had been going on with her brothers.
Yes.
I have a dream. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was one of the most well-known civil rights leaders. He was famous for leading peaceful protests in 1963. Thousands of people attended his march on Washington to support civil rights. King gave a speech at the end of the march. In it, he said, "I have a dream that one day little black boys and little black girls will be able to join hands with little black boys and little black girls as sisters and brothers."
Yes.
When Dr. Martin Luther King spoke, his words moved people to action. That night, Connie heard the twins talking in the backyard. "It's on for tomorrow morning," Robbie said. "We meet downtown in front of Joy's Ice Cream at 10 o'clock. They'll think twice about not serving us," Tommy said. Connie's heart thudded. Her brothers were planning to demonstrate. She had heard the demonstrators often got hurt. Some were sent to jail. "Would you give up your seat?" In 1955, Rosa Parks boarded a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. As the bus filled, the driver ordered Miss Parks to give up her seat to a white man. She refused and was arrested. African Americans boycotted the city's bus in protest. They walked, used cabs, or carpooled instead. After 381 days, the city of Montgomery agreed to let African Americans sit where they wanted on buses. Rosa Parks sits on a bus after a boycott. The next morning, Mark watched Connie climb over the fence. "We have to hurry," Connie said. "I think the twins planned a civil rights demonstration downtown. I want to make sure they are okay." Mark hesitated. He was afraid, but he wanted to help his new friend. 9 brave kids in Little Rock. In September 1957, 9 African American students volunteered to attend an all-white high school in Little Rock, Arkansas. The state's governor refused to let them enter. President Dwight Eisenhower sent federal troops to guard them on the way in and out of school. These brave students are known as the Little Rock Nine. The Little Rock Nine are escorted by soldiers at the end of school. Connie and Mark ran downtown. African American teenagers were marching on Main Street. Rows of marchers shouted, "Separate is not equal." They filled the streets like the town's high school band did before a big football game. Only these teens were not smiling. Connie and Mark squeezed through the marchers and looked for the twins. A first grader makes history. In 1960, first grader Ruby Bridges became the first student to integrate schools in New Orleans, Louisiana. The U.S. Supreme Court had already ordered all schools to integrate, but most refused. Ruby's parents enrolled her in a white school. White parents didn't let their children attend class with Ruby. She had a teacher all to herself. Neither Ruby nor her teacher missed a day of school. Ruby Bridges is escorted by U.S. Marshals to protect her from protesters. White people with angry faces watched the demonstrators. Some shouted ugly words. Connie remembered her parents talking about the African Americans who rode in the front seats of buses from Alabama to Mississippi. They were hurt badly by angry white people. Could that happen to the twins? Suddenly someone shouted, "Police!" Connie knew the police sometimes hurt demonstrators. She grabbed Mark's hand. Police violence. The civil rights movement angered many white people. They did not want African Americans to be treated equally. Sometimes they became violent. African Americans could not rely on the police for protection. The police usually took the side of the racist white people. Police attack a protester in Washington, D.C. This was only Mark's second day in a new city. He'd never seen people so angry. "We need help," Mark hollered. He and Connie squeezed to the back of the marchers as fast as they could. Then they sprinted to Connie's house. Mark's heart thudded with each step. He hoped Connie's mother would know what to do. Church bombed. On September 15, 1963, members of a church in Birmingham, Alabama, were attending Sunday school classes. A bomb went off and killed 4 young girls. White men who were members of a violent racist group were to blame. The African American community was devastated. The explosion shocked the city. Family members outside the funeral of one of the girls killed in the bombings. Connie quickly told her mother about the twins. Miss Underwood was angry, but not at the kids. "Let's go get your brothers," she said. "They are trying to do the right thing, but they should have gotten a permit first. Then the police wouldn't be able to arrest them." Civil rights on TV. In the 1960s, many families bought televisions for the first time. They watched the evening news programs. They could see and hear exactly what was happening to protesters. More people learned about the civil rights movement. They could travel from all across the country to join demonstrations. Viewers watched Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights leaders deliver stirring speeches on TV. A few weeks later, Connie and Mark marched between the twins. Their parents were right behind them, carrying a parade permit. Now the police couldn't stop them. As they marched past Joey's ice cream, Connie looked at Mark and the twins. She knew they were all thinking the same thing. "One day, we will walk right in the front door, we will order ice cream sodas, and we'll twirl on the red-topped stools." The Civil Rights Memorial. The Civil Rights Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama, honors people who died fighting for civil rights. On the stone wall, water flows across the words from Dr. Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. The words say that African Americans will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like water and the righteous like a mighty stream. The name of 40 civil rights heroes are written on the memorial.